Okay, welcome to this week's webinar. Today we're going to be going through obviously how you can prepare a takeoff or an estimate using PlusSpec. Now this is not going to be an overview on the quantification and estimating features of PlusSpec. Rather it's actually going to be more of a how-to guide. Often we get asked by the builders and estimators that are trying to prepare a quote or an estimate, what is the best way to set it up? How do I actually insert plans that I can trace? And this session will be going through and demonstrating how you can easily do that. Before we go on, I'd just like to always say that we do have about 25 countries that are represented today. We seem to be averaging at least 25, so that's really excellent. And we actually do have a wide range. We have mostly builders today, but we do have a substantial amount of architects, designers, and interior designers also. So this is going to be very focused and centric around the idea of how do you set up PlusSpec so that you can trace your plans. Now, I'm going to be showing you in metric because it's what enables me to present in a live format very easily for you. However, of course, PlusSpec is or has been made for every country. It's made to suit whatever kind of building that you want. If you're using imperial measurements, I'm obviously going to be showing you in metric, but just try to look past that. Obviously, anything that we do in metric, you're just going to be using feet and inches instead. If you're from parts of Europe and you're using centimeters, obviously it's the same thing. I'm using millimeters, but you're converting it into centimeters. So try to look past that. Also, lately I've been getting a lot of questions regarding PlusSpec's capability in the sense of how can it work for more complex or more bespoke kind of projects. Often I do hear builders and architects saying, well, isn't PlusSpec more for kind of simplistic building? And the answer is no. And it kind of frustrates me when I hear that actually. PlusSpec has been made for the entire industry. We think it's the only software that has been made to suit the entire industry. It has been made to suit architects and designers. It's been made to suit builders for your estimating and your quoting, but also for on-site. We have many builders that are using PlusSpec models on-site. And it has also been made for product manufacturers. So using real products and getting them into the BIM world. And the reason that we do it is because we think that the frustrations of the industry and the reason why it's not as efficient as it could be is because of communication breakdown. If every single person is communicating better, we are all going to benefit. And that is the benefit of PlusSpec. So for the architects that are here today and the designers, although this is going to relate more to the builder, by communicating better to your builder, you're going to end up having a better result too. You're going to have more projects that end up being built. You're going to be able to stay on budget. And we'll go through the reasons why, in many cases, builders actually do stack a job full of contingencies, particularly if it is from an architect or a builder. And we're going to talk about how PlusSpec is going to obviously make the whole process a lot easier. At the end, I'm also going to quickly talk about how we have now a lot of examples of architects and builders that are both using PlusSpec and sharing their models and really communicating and working together on a completely different level. And it makes a better result and each person more profitable, but more importantly, it also makes happier clients. So just to reiterate, the projects that I'm showing you, they might be simple. They might be a different vernacular than what you're used to. I'm using, often when we demonstrate, we just demonstrate the Californian bungalow style because it's quite easy just to demonstrate and not get caught up in detail. You could give me any project to any level of complexity and I could do the exact same thing. Unlike other software, we always present in a live format. We don't want to tell you that you can do things quickly and easily and not be able to demonstrate it to you. So it's about maximizing our time too. Today I'm actually going to be using an example of a project that a builder is actually quoting on, and he's given me permission to use his project. Now, if you're using a Mac, you have the advantage of being able to import your PDFs that you receive from your architect or designer directly into PlusSpec. However, if you're using a PC, you don't have the capability to actually import PDFs. Now, before I go on, I'd just like to always reiterate that the benefit of being part of the live session is that you get to ask questions. I typically don't go through or get distracted by the questions throughout the session, but it's really good practice just to start asking you questions as soon as you think of them. And that way, when we go into the Q&A at the end, I'm going to have the list of questions and be able to quickly go through them rather than have to wait for you to type them out. So as soon as you have a question, don't hesitate to write them in the questions box. Okay, so again, with a PC, if you're using a PDF or you get a PDF from your architect or designer, you are actually going to have to convert it. There are many free applications that you can use to convert PDFs into a JPEG or a PNG. And I'm actually going to demonstrate on a PC. So I'm going to show you what you would need to do. It is worth noting though that if you do get a PDF set from your architect or designer, and it's a multiple page booklet, such as this one, there's 7 pages in this booklet, you won't be able to insert the PDF because it will only insert the first page. You actually need to split it up into its separate pages. And again, depending on what program you're using on your Mac, you should be able to convert them into separate pages. And then you can import each page individually. So I'm going to show you that I'm in this PDF set. I've chosen the ground floor plan to start with. Again, you could do this in kind of any way. Our software, we've made it flexible. We've put a huge amount of emphasis on the notion of agility or flexibility. We think a lot of other software, a lot of other software are so constrained by the ways and workflows and methodologies that you go about creating your 3D models or your estimate. We don't. It's open to you. You can essentially make PlusSpec suit you and your workflow. We think that's really important because we know that everyone works differently. So although I might show you kind of a process today, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to stick to it. You can adjust it and manipulate it however you want. I typically start with the ground floor, and if it's a multi-family project or a multi-story project, I typically do start with the floor plans. So what I'm going to do is, if you're using, again, a Mac or a PC, you can use a snipping tool or the grab tool. We also use a tool called Fast Stone Capture. It's a great little tool. But in this case, I'm just going to actually use the snipping tool. And now I'm going to just quickly take the boundary of what I want to see. So that's good enough. I can now save it. And I'm going to save it on my desktop. Just move it on my other screen. And call it whatever you will. If you're using a project file, make sure you save it in the project file. So I'm just going to call it ground floor. If you're from North America, there might be a little bit of confusion. If we refer to ground floor, that is your first floor, and our second floor is your, or our first floor is your second floor. It's terminology, you can adjust it however you need. So I'm just going to quickly save that ground floor or first floor. And I'm now going to open PlusSpec. I've opened a new file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go File, Import, and I'm going to check my desktop. And I'm going to find my ground floor or first floor. If you can't see it in your project file, it's important to note that you can toggle this little menu down the bottom, and it enables you to better search for the kind of file that you want to insert. So make sure that if you've saved that as a JPEG, that you look for the JPEG. The other thing that's really important by inserting it with this methodology is that you ensure that you're using the image as an image, not as a texture. And when you're happy and you've selected it, simply select import. You now need to just left click and release your button to place it. And I typically like to find the origin point. Left click, release, and it's now saying what's the scale. So you need to left click again just to place it. Now you have your ground floor that's been imported. Now, often one of the questions that we get asked is, why is the quality of the PDF not very good, or the image? And it really depends on the resolution of the image in the first place. There's two things that could affect it. Obviously, the PDF that you're given or the image might not be extremely high quality to start with. Secondly, if you are converting it, particularly for the PC, into a JPEG, when you're saving it, the resolution might be quite low. The other thing is, you can actually change the resolution inside of PlusSpec for SketchUp to make sure that your images actually read better. And we'll quickly try to demonstrate that. I think it's in preferences. Let's have a look here. I should have looked at this before I went in there. Okay, so it is in the OpenGL. And what you want to do is you want to use maximum texture size. Make sure it's ticked. And that will actually have a dramatic, it will dramatically affect the way that your images read and your textures, etc. Now that you've brought in your PDF or your image, or the plan that you actually want to start tracing, obviously you need to turn it into a real-world condition. You need to turn it into 1:1, so it actually has meaning and scale. So what you need to do is just simply left-click it so it turns blue, and then click on the PlusSpec Scale tool. And here is where a dimensioned plan becomes a lot easier, because you can simply find a dimension that you want to use. And I typically like to find one of the larger ones, zoom in, left-click to start. I'm going to zoom out, zoom in again. I like to make sure that I'm staying on the axes, which means you can see that I'm on the green or the red axes. And then once you're kind of close, left-click again. So that's my second left-click. And now before I do anything, I just need to type in the measurement. So that's 12,800 and press enter. This image or PDF reference has now been scaled accurately. If you don't have a plan, so if you're an architect or designer that's going to do a similar thing, like for example, if you like to freehand sketch and then trace over your freehand sketches, it's the same process. But if you don't have a dimension, then obviously you need to just take something that you know. So if you know that you're using a particular wall width, then scale from that wall width, or your door width, or whatever it may be. So that's your ground floor plan. So you're going to repeat the same process for your first floor plan. So you're simply going down in the PDF, selecting the first floor and repeating the process. So again, I can close this grab tool now and I can grab it again. And I'm just going to select it like this. And I'm going to again save, and this time I'm going to say first floor, save. Okay, close that. And I could start to model my ground floor right now before I even bring in my first floor plan. However, I do find that a lot of people like to set up the project first before they even start to model. Now, I've got two screens on my machine, and often people even ask me, well, are you going to bring in the elevations? What about the structural engineering set, etc.? You can, and I'll show you a couple of examples how you can do that in other models. I typically prefer to kind of think about it how I'm going to build it. I find that if you start with the ground floor and then go to the first floor, your elevations and everything are getting done as you're doing them anyway. So you don't really need to bring any elevations. If you've got two screens, you can just make sure that you've got the elevations open on your other screen. But let's quickly just follow the same process. We're going to file, import, and we're going to find this first floor. And if you're in the US, then obviously second floor. Again, we're going to follow the same process. I'm going to find a measurement. I'm going to click on my scale tool, and I'm going to just left click and left click. Now obviously, because we're using a PDF, we're basically near enough. We can't be 100% accurate because we're not able to actually grab those lines. We don't know where the exact endpoint is. However, for the vast majority of your estimating purposes or your quantification, takeoff, etc., as long as you're within about 2 to 5 millimeters or a couple of inches, you're fine. So that's my first floor. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and overlay it, and you can do it in a few different ways. One is to find a part in your, or like some kind of line that can be easily lined up and referenced. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to left click on my first floor, and I'm going to use the SketchUp Move tool, and that's using M on your keyboard or the SketchUp Move icon, and then left click on the point that you want to try and line up. So I'm going to say that point here. I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to line it up. So I'm going to zoom in until I can kind of see how they're overlaying. Like, I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to left click to place it. Not too bad. And now I want to actually offset it. So I would be looking at my elevation plans. So I'll quickly go back to my PDF. If I have it open, I may have actually closed it. I did. So I'm going to quickly open that and manipulate that again. Just bear with me. Okay. So basically I'm going and referencing my elevations, and I'm looking at my ceiling heights and the different heights that I need to be aware of. It enables me to better kind of set out the plan so I can start to trace them a little bit easier. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So I know that I've got a 2700. So whilst I've got it selected, I'm going to move up on the blue axis. So again, I've just pressed the M on my keyboard or the SketchUp Move tool, and I'm raising it on the blue axis. And whilst I have it on the blue axis, I can now type in my exact measurement. Okay. So I now know that's the level of my ground floor, and that's the level of my first floor. And you're going to want to manipulate your PDFs quite easily. You don't really want them getting in the way. You can actually just simply right-click your PDF and hide them, and then select Edit, Unhide All if you want to. And for a lot of our beginner users, it's probably one of the most easy ways to go about it. However, I do like to add a new layer. So clicking on the layer in my default tray, I'm going to add 00 ground floor PDF. And I'm going to add another one, 00 underscore first floor PDF. And now I'm going to left click on my ground floor PDF. And in my entity info, I'm going to assign it to ground floor PDF. I'm going to left click on my first floor and I'm going to assign that one to the first floor PDF. This means now that in my layers, I can very quickly and easily turn off those layers. So if I want to turn off my first floor, I can simply toggle the visibility. Same with my ground floor. But again, if you're just new to PlusSpec, you might not really want to play around with layers at this stage. You can simply right click, hide, and then when you want to see it, edit, unhide all. I do prefer to focus on different levels, again, kind of in the same way that you're going to build. And let's talk about the differences between PlusSpec and other estimating software. PlusSpec has so many more advantages. You are actually going to be able to get rid of the error and oversight that kind of plagues the industry. We deal with hundreds, if not thousands, of builders around the world. And the biggest issue is obviously time. You're basically quoting for free and you're trying to do it in your spare time. And a very complex job can take a very, very long time to quote. We're getting told that for a residential home, multi-story, like so 2 levels, for example, bespoke architectural design can be taking over or close to 200 hours, traditionally. That's a very long time, especially not getting paid and when you aren't even sure that you're going to get the job. And this goes back into what we were talking about before, just quickly. Often there's a reason why builders stack jobs with contingencies, particularly from from architects and designers, and if they're kind of complex. And the reason why is obviously if you're getting a plan set of 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 pages, then there is a lot of information that you need to account for. There is a lot of complexity. There's also a huge amount of concentration and double checking to make sure that things are lining up properly and that you've accounted for everything. It's also very rare for a builder to have the time to dedicate one big stint or one process to actually do a quote. Rather, you're starting to do a quote, you'll walk away because you're busy, you're distracted by other things, and you'll come back. And the problem with traditional ways of doing your quotes or estimates is that it can be very easy to forget where you're at. The other thing is that you're doing calculations, you're using a lot of maths. You're attributing those mathematical equations to the different build-ups and materials in a project. And it can be very easy for you to make errors through your mathematical calculations and your formulas. So what PlusSpec is saying is see it. What you draw is what you're going to get. It's the benefit of 3D. More importantly, you're going to be able to understand the job. You're basically building it virtually, and that is PlusSpec. It's virtual design and construction plus estimating. By being able to visualize it and see it, it means that you know that it works. It means that you know what you've accounted for. Any material that you don't have, any item that you don't have in your model means that you have not actually accounted for it. Again, this is going to be in how-to, so we're going to very quickly dive into quickly tracing this project and giving you an example of the different steps. However, I really want to emphasize that because there are a lot of architects and a lot of designers that lose jobs. By the time they go to the builder for quote and get a quote, or even going to a QA or whoever's giving you how much money your project is going to cost, you're so far down the line and the budget just gets blown out. And again, if you can work with your builder, if you can give them and communicate in a better way and save their time and make them be able to work smarter, you're both going to benefit. They're going to be able to quote in probably, in a very, very short amount of time. They're going to understand your project without any deciphering, because that's the problem with plans, it's deciphering. They're not going to have to be doing overlaying. They're not going to have to be worrying about all of these different items, the engineering versus the architectural versus whatever, with 50 plus pages. In a virtual model, what you see is what you get. It's very clearly understood. And it's going to make more accurate estimates. It's going to reduce their time dramatically. And more importantly, it means that you're going to end up with less stacked contingencies, less provisional allowances and so forth, so that when they're going to your client to tell them how much it's going to cost, you're going to be far more on budget. There's benefits across the board for better communication between the design aspect and the estimating aspect. But let's quickly focus on the estimating aspect, because obviously most builders are still getting the traditional 2D from their architect. Now, if your architect or designer is using other BIM software, it still is kind of useless. Other BIM software are not made for builders. They are just geometry. They're just empty shapes. They have a little bit of meaning associated with them, but they don't have smart materials, smart quantification. So even if they're using other software to do it in, you're going to still have to convert it into using PlusSpec tools, which are a lot smarter. Okay, so what I would be doing is I'd obviously be reading through the different plans. I've got them open on my other screen, and I would be ensuring that when I start to trace my plans, I'm using the right materials and I'm specifying what the structural engineer has said, etc. So I like to start with the wall tool, and so I'm going to click on the wall tool, and I'm going to quickly run you through how you can now start to quote, and you'll see how quickly and easily it will be formed. Obviously, I'm going to quickly try and do it as fast as I can while still explaining things to you, but you'll see that we should be able to generate a fair bit in a very short amount of time. Next week, if you do have any questions more relating to the exact takeoff or bill of materials or quantification and the estimating, we are actually going to be doing a part 2, and that is advanced estimating. We'll be showcasing every single thing that you can do currently, plus what you'll be able to do with PlusSpec Elite, and showing you how you can do 100% accurate estimates. Anyway, I'm looking at the plans, I know what wall I need to use, I know what the heights are, the header heights and all those kinds of things. I would be going through and specifying the timber or the lumber, whatever I need to do. I know that I'm just going to say I'm happy with this at the moment, so I'm going to press submit. Now what you need to do is you need to left click to start tracing your plan. I like to start on the exterior, but you could even be clicking on the internal if you knew it. I'm just going to left click on this exterior leaf and I'm going to start drawing. And make sure you draw clockwise. PlusSpec will tell you what side your internal skin is on versus your external, so keep a note of that. If you want to change your wall alignment, you can just toggle the wall alignment by clicking the right arrow key on your keyboard. Now I'm on the external, so I can start to trace. Now, if you're wanting to do a virtual model that you're going to also build from that you can use on site, I would recommend that you would be following the dimensions exactly. So you'd be getting on the axes and then you'd be typing it in at the exact dimension. However, if you're still using your using PlusSpec mainly for the estimating and quantification side of things, near enough is often good enough. So as long as you're following the plan, now that you've scaled it smartly, then really that's all that matters. The only thing that I'm looking at in PlusSpec is my axes. I just need to ensure that I am actually drawing on axes. So I'm looking simply at the red and the green, making sure that my wall is reading as green and red. Now, the last joining piece is the one you want to take or be aware of, because to easily reference the first point, so it's exactly at 90 degrees, you want to hold down your shift, and then that way what you can do is you can hover over the starting point, which will turn to that black circle. Left click it, and now you're going to come down exactly at the 90 degrees, and you can simply form your walls. Okay, so I've created my walls, but I've done more than that. Unlike any other software, building and estimating software, the vast majority, we've automatically created structure. So I've put in my noggings or my blocking. I've assigned obviously my top plates, my bottom plates, and all those kinds of things. If there's something that I want to change, for example, these nogging spacings, then I can simply go and do that. I might want to select all my walls, edit wall, and I can manipulate them. So what I'm trying to show you here is that although you might start drawing, the PlusSpec tools are so flexible and parametric, and what that means is that you can simply go through and modify them at any time. For example, I've changed it and now I've changed my nogging spacings, and I can do whatever I want to do there. I can go back through the different scenes because they might help me model smarter and faster. If I wanted to be dead accurate with my gauge, I could also put down my grid, set it to my brick gauge, and make sure it's even working to brick. But again, as for an estimate, I don't really care. All I'm doing is continuously looking at my project, making sure that I'm using the same materials and the wall types, and now I'm just simply tracing. It really is that simple. Okay, there's that one. I'm going to do the same over on this side. Try to draw clockwise at all times. Hold down shift, it just means that you're going to be dead accurate. And I'm going around and I'm tracing, so that's walls, that's my first floor, or my ground floor, depending on your terminology. Now we can go into the internal walls, so I'm simply going into my wall tool again, and I'm going to nominate what's been specified. Now many of you, in fact, most of you will not have this structural wall feature, but now what it means is you can nominate what walls are structural and what walls aren't. You'll be getting this in the 2017 release, which is due really, really soon. So I'm going to go into internal only, and I'm going to say that these aren't structural, which means they're not going to put headers above the doors and all those kinds of things. I'm now going to press submit. Now in here, when I'm working with timber or lumber, I actually like to click on the structure scene, because it makes it more easy for me to actually click on the bottom plate where I want it to be joined. So when you're starting to draw, if you make a mistake or if it hasn't aligned properly, you can double click on your right arrow key to change the alignment, or you can just press escape and start drawing again. Okay. Now remember, it's always good practice to draw clockwise, even for your internal walls. So what I normally suggest is that you take that mentality. Now with this one though, it's easier if I just take that point. So I'm just going to zoom in and I'm going to start to draw. And I'm going to come across, and you can hold down Shift if it makes it easier, and then you can double click to place that wall. And now we're just going to continue the process. So I'm going to be trying to work clockwise, just makes it easier. And let's go like from here to here and click. Now if you want to move your walls, the PlusSpec tools are easily redefined. You can go into the wall tool and you can push and pull them. So it means I can left click and I can move it out if I've realized I didn't place it in the right spot. Now this is an easy process. It's simply me just continuously going through and adding in my walls. Once I get to a point that I'm happy, I can then even now start by going back into the all scene, thinking about putting in my doors and windows. And again, I like to concentrate and finish the ground floor as much as I possibly can before looking at the first floor. I'm not going to run through too much in drawing doors and windows, but essentially you're going to be looking at your plan, understanding what you need, and then you're going to be adding it accordingly. So let's start with a window. In fact, I'll only show you a window. You need to left click on your wall, click on the window tool. And this is when you'll be referencing your elevations and so forth, checking out the actual windows that you want to use too. I know I want to use that, yeah, great, whatever. You can even look at the plan depending on whether they show it or not. So this one, let's do it at that. I think it's probably that measurement, press submit. And now you can see it's gone transparent, so I can easily trace my plan. And I was right, so I can type that in exactly, 2170, press enter. And now I've placed my window. Now I know from my elevation that my window is actually a little bit different to that. It actually has a highlight, side light, and you can do that by simply using the window option tool and manipulating your window. And you do that through the second dialog. So you're going to open the dialog. Let's just close that one. And now you can do your maximum window height and widths. So I want to extend both actually. And I want my maximum height to be only, say, you'll be looking at the plan, so it's a lot easier for you. I'm just guesstimating, but as you can see, I can quickly and easily change the configuration of my window to suit what's actually been specified. So you're going around, you're just putting in the rest of your walls, putting in your doors and your windows and making it suit. Once you get to a point where you want to start focusing on the first floor, you can do so. To place the stair though, you can even do that now, but again, you can come back at any time and continuously edit these things. So you're just going to choose the stair that you want to put in. Maybe it's just a floating stair in this case, press submit, and you're going to drop it into your project. And now you can obviously change the height to suit. Maybe you don't know it. I like to put the head height, so show head height, which means you're going to have less error for your first floor. You're then going to use the SketchUp rotate tool, and this gives you the ability to simply rotate it. Using the move tool, the SketchUp move tool, you can move it in place again like we've done for other things, and you can place it where it needs to be in your project. That's good enough for now. That's my ground floor, and imagine I've just gone around and put in all that extra detail. As I'm talking to you and doing that, the vast majority of my ground floor takeoff has been done, because clearly I would have been specifying what the engineer has said I needed to include in my framing. I've specified my wall types, my windows, my doors, my plaster, or however I'm going to do my internal lining. All of these things have been captured. If you've got paint that you're using, you can even paint your different materials. So right now, if I was to click on my takeoff, on my quantities, I've got a 100% accurate takeoff to what I have drawn. If there's other items like the windows and doors and other walls that I haven't done, I know my takeoff isn't complete, and very quickly and easily I can see that it's not complete. I know where I'm at in my takeoff. If I wanted to turn my first floor back on, I'm going to, I think I hit it actually, so edit, unhide all. Okay, I've now got my first floor. I'm going to go back into my all scene, and I can now see where it relates, and I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going into my wall tool, and I'm going to select the kind of wall that I want to use. Again, I'm making assumptions on this one. I'm not trying to be looking at the plans and making it 100% accurate. I'm going to choose this one, and I'm happy with this. I'm going to press submit. These ones are structural, press submit. Again, it's a simple matter of tracing the actual plan, changing your wall alignment to suit, and this one, I will just, again, I can move it. So even if I haven't done it right, which I haven't done it right there, it's fine. I can push and pull my walls. That's part of the flexibility. You don't have to worry whilst you're drawing about being 100% precise, because you can change it at any time later. Okay, so quickly and easily going around tracing, just getting on my axes and putting this one in. Now I know if I go into my structure scene here, and if I quickly hide my first floor, I can see that in reality, I would suggest that this actual floor is going to be over the top of the under top plate. So all I'm doing is getting on the axes and aligning it. Now I use the, I need to get into this wall to do that. Push-pull, you're selecting the part that you want to move, and again, getting on the axes, you can even stick to it, and now I've pushed and pulled, and every single wall has gone with it. So let's have a look at that in the all mode. Okay, I can turn off my plan again. Okay, so that's working quite well. Now it's just a matter, I know that it's a fairly simple roof on this, so I'll be looking back at my plan, my first floor plan, walls, generate, roof from walls, and I also know that this one is actually going, it's not following that shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to exit that, because I know if I turn my first plan back on, that my actual roof is coming out. What I can simply do is left click on the lines that I want to move and get on the axes, and I can align it. So I know that this one is coming out like so. So again, I can move this line now. I can align it with that plate there. Okay, what's it doing on this side? It is actually coming out, so I'm moving this line. So I'm adjusting the face of my roof. So now if I left click on that face, you can see that that's where it is actually getting spanned from. I'd be looking at my eave, or my soffit obviously, and seeing what it would actually be, but I'm just going to guess. I'm going into my roof tool. It's a simple pitched roof, this one, I can see. So all I'm doing is specifying what's been specified in the plan set. I'd be looking at the pitch of degrees or the ratio and the materials, fascia type, all of those kinds of things. And your soffit, obviously, soffit and eaves. So this one I'm just going to guess is 450, press submit. And with the click of a button, your roof has been generated. Your capping, your valley, your gutter, your fascia, all of these items have been 100% accurately, they're being quantified behind the scenes. Again, I can continue to turn off and on my first floor. And all I'm doing, like with my first floor, like I did for the ground floor, is looking at my plans, seeing where I need my windows, where I need everything, and putting it in. I can also very quickly, before I go on, I can walls generate my floor face. And I know that in this one, the floor face is actually getting manipulated. So I'm actually going to just hide that wall, makes it a little bit easier. I know that in actual fact, this joist is coming over to, let's just say here. Again, I can manipulate that again. And like with the roof, I can continue to manipulate it so that the joist or the structure is working exactly how it will be. So I'm going to edit, unhide last. I'm going to turn my first floor PDF back on. Where does my, I can see that that joist actually goes all the way out to here. Again, you're just constantly manipulating the face. And then now if I hide that, I can simply go into my floor tool, go into my joists, and specify what my structural engineer has specified. Now you can break up your face if you've got different spans as well and joist directions. And obviously you'll be adding the steel and everything else that you need, but we won't be going into that now because we are about to go into the Q&A. I just want to quickly show you that I go into my structure, and I didn't do that perfectly, but you go into your structure and you can see what is working, what is not working. Does this actually need to be pushed back? In actual fact, what's happening is I didn't allow for the first floor actually needs to move up. So the thickness of the flooring, so I'm coming up on my blue axis and I'm placing it onto my top plate. And I would also know that I'm probably going to regenerate that joist so that it aligns properly over the top of the top plate. So even by drawing my first floor kind of on top of my ground floor, just by selecting all your walls and your joists, etc., you can move them into place just by getting onto your blue axis. Hopefully what I've shown you is that by me talking to you and demonstrating this, you can see that already a large proportion of this project has already been done. I didn't move my roof with that, which is why that happened. So you want to move your roof if you move your first floor at the same time. But as you can see, it wouldn't actually take me that much longer to really fatten out this project and put in the rest of the details that I need. So within a matter of hours, you've got a virtual model, you know exactly where you're up to, you know what you've quantified and allowed for and what you haven't, by what you've drawn and what you haven't. And it's an easy process that if you do get distracted, if you are doing other things, as we're all doing, you're simply saving where you're at and you're coming back. You're looking at the project and you're understanding the mistakes or what you need to do next. The other benefit I didn't really talk about too much is obviously the ability for you to be able to see error and oversight, to raise questions to your architect or designer. And PlusSpec has a great inbuilt feature. If your architect or designer is using PlusSpec, you can actually use our tag tool, communication tools, so that the architect and the builder can speak within the model together. They can leave notes, they can assign them, request for information, and so forth. And it's using your model as the central database to record all of the conversations between you and anyone else that you're having or needing to communicate with. Is time and date stamped so that you can record the communication and everyone knows where they're at. And this is really transforming the way that we communicate. Now, I want to quickly end before we go on the Q&A on some of best case examples. If you are a builder and you want to be able to quote in lightning speed, and I mean within a couple of hours, you will actually be able to do that with PlusSpec, but you need your architect or designer to be using PlusSpec and to share their model with you, or at least give you a builder model that you can do your quote with. Because it becomes an audit process. Rather than you having to import their PDFs like I've shown you and trace them and build up the model and try to decipher it, instead you're getting the model. You're going to very quickly and easily understand their design intent and what they're trying to achieve. And you can add the elements that you need to for your takeoff. So maybe the architect hasn't put the structural engineering stuff in there, so you can do that using the structural engineering tools or the structural tools or steel tools, etc., so that they're getting quantified. So it's going to be more of a matter of you assigning your prices separately, and obviously that isn't shared between architect and builder. That's your own individual thing, but you're going to simply audit it, raise requests for information where required, and you have an automatic takeoff without having to do anything. So that's best world condition. That's what we're trying to achieve. If architects and builders can work smarter and can communicate better amongst each other, everyone's going to get along, trust me, and everyone will become more profitable, everything will be faster, and you're going to have happier clients. So for those of you who weren't able to attend the live session today, we're going to go into the Q&A, so thanks for coming. Okay, so we're going to go into the Q&A for those of you who are still here. So we've got a few questions. I'm going to try and go through them. So don't hesitate to start asking. Okay. Okay, so a couple of questions that we're going to go through. The color for the layer, does it appear in the model to assist in copying plan? I assume that you mean the color by layer. So as you can see, all of our layers have the potential to have colors associated to them. Some of them do, others don't, but you can always assign them yourself. You can actually use color by layer. It is different. I don't necessarily think it would help you copy the plan. You need to change to color by layer mode. So if I do that by clicking on this here, color by layer, you can see that you can change the layering systems. So for example, the wall tool, if I go down and assign a layer to those ones, by the wall group, I'm going to click on that and turn it to be green. Okay. You have to know what layers you want to show too. So probably do it on the brickwork layer. Might be the one that we need to do that on. That gives you the ability to divide your project in different ways, or to display it in different ways, right? So it can read differently, but I don't necessarily think that it would help you estimate better. Okay, so setting up guidelines has been a common one. I've seen it asked a couple of times here. You can definitely set up guidelines. It really, as I said to you, everything that I've shown you today is, there's no set order or methodology. If you find that guides would be easier for you, then by all means do it. And what guides are, for those of you who don't know, it gives you the ability, for example, you've used the tape tool, SketchUp tape tool, you can select the green or the red axes and even the blue axes, and you can place guides. So I can very quickly and easily say, okay, that's where my first guide is, and then now I can continue to add more guides by grabbing other guides, placing them in the model, and it means that when I start to trace, I have the ability to do it like so. So, you know, putting a couple of guides in like that, I can now very quickly and easily trace around those guides. It really depends on your style. Okay, can you use a material to represent an item and have it quantified? We're going to be going into that in more detail in part 2, which is our advanced takeoff and estimating. You can. So any material that you create with PlusSpec, our materials are intelligent. Not only are they BIM, which means they're filled with information, but they're also tied into the ability to quantify. As long as you're using a PlusSpec material, and you can use the PlusSpec material creator to do it, then they will be quantified. In all of our tools, you'll see that every single material has a different layer, has a different item. Now, in certain items, you can actually represent them in different ways too. So in, for example, the masonry veneer, in the materials and finishes, there might be, you might not be using termite barrier. So if you're not using termite, you can change it. You can adjust your own so that you can quantify that material as something else. Same with the hardware. If there's something that you specifically want to quantify using that calculation, then you can add it there. But you do need to either use the brick hardware as generic, or one of these ones as generic, or create the one with a specific material and name. This feature has become even, well, extremely powerful, and I think it's going to hopefully blow a lot of you away when you see what's coming with the PlusSpec Elite and the capabilities to estimate. Essentially, it's going to become completely flexible and give you the ability to do whatever you want to do. So for those of you who are interested in seeing actual quantification and estimating and creating your own materials and quantifying them, make sure you do attend. This one, as I said to you earlier, was more about how do you set it up from scratch? How do you start actually quoting and drawing from architectural or design plans? Can you set material rates in your copy of PlusSpec? Yes, you can. So it is very easy for you to add costing or pricing to every single material. I'm not going to focus on it too much here. In the standard version, you've got the $sign. When you're creating or draw anything with PlusSpec, you have the ability to set price to every single material. And then that's going to be remembered because you save that to the cloud or to your hard copy. And it means that whenever you're drawing or using those materials, your pricing is already in there. Now, this is going to be even further maximized and made far more powerful in the PlusSpec Elite. So do come into our next session, part 2, to see that too. When updating, does it wipe these rates? In some instances, it has in the past. This has been rectified. So when you create your PlusSpec costing or your pricing information, this will be saved. Now you can also save it as CSV. And again, make sure you come to the next advanced estimating and takeoff session. It's going to run through all of this. And so no, the answer is it will not wipe it. Okay, a couple more that I'll go through. Okay, how can you edit from internal floor system to external floor system? Okay, so you're simply creating two different floor systems. So obviously in this example, you're going to be treating the joists totally different to how you're going to treat them on the internal. So what you would actually be doing if you wanted to do it a little bit smarter is you would be actually creating the two separate joists. So I'm going to generate floor face, I'm going to create the joist for my internal, and I would be specifying the build-up that would suit that. So press submit. Again, I'm just going to tell it which way I want it to span. Okay, so I've got this section. And now what I'd be doing is I'd be adding in my other section of my joist, so my external, and I'm treating them as two separate pieces, which means I can modify the build-up very easily and differently, and I can also quantify them differently. So if I need to add more materials or build-ups to the external to waterproof it and so forth, then I can easily do it. So the simple answer for that, and that relates to everything, if there are certain systems that you need to modify or treat differently, draw them as separate pieces, because essentially they are. What type of image do you need to create a material, PDF, JPEG size? Okay, I assume that you're talking about creating a custom PlusSpec material. You do need to actually have a JPEG or a PNG. You'll see when you go and create your own, or try to create your own PlusSpec material in the material creator, it will tell you if you've exceeded the limit. It's, I believe, 150 KB. So to go and create a new material in your wall tool, for example, you simply need to, let's go into here. Create material, load in your image that you want to use. Again, it has to be a JPEG or PNG, and I believe the maximum size is 150 KB. If you do it any larger, it would just slow down your model, which is why we don't allow it. I'll go through a few more. We do have a lot popping up, so I'll try and go through as many as possible. Can you isolate stud walls into plates, noggings, studs, etc.? PlusSpec does it for you. So when you do a takeoff, and I haven't actually demonstrated that yet, but if I was to do a takeoff from this model of what I've got right now, you'll see that everything has been separated for you. And obviously you can modify that however you want. But if I go into, the wall tool on my frame, you can see that I've got the ability to see all of my different items in here. And it's pretty easy for you to determine what is the actual top plates, bottom plates, and what is your noggings. Okay, so that will answer that. and obviously everything else is broken up into separate pieces. Like even in your frame, I mean, for example, if I get rid of that, your headers are separate, and they're treated differently. So you can toggle this to go through what you want to show and what you don't want to show. Even your structural versus your non-structural, and it will break it up into its different sizes. How can we be assured that this is accurate? Well, it is, unlike other software, there's no mathematical equation. What you draw is what you get. If you draw a wall that's 1 meter wide and 1 meter tall, you know exactly what it will be in there for every single material. It's a very simple calculation, but we're not relying on error. The only time that you're going to get an error in your quantities is if you have not drawn it to the right size. And that should be fairly easy for you to determine by seeing it visually on screen. When is the next session going to be? So the advanced estimating and takeoff, we're going to run through the PlusSpec Elite. It will either be next week or the week after. For those of you who are getting the mail outs about the webinars, just obviously, keep on coming, keep on asking your questions and benefiting from these webinars. We've done them to help you, and we will let you know. It's just a matter of kind of locking it in, so you will know shortly. Is there the ability to share costings? Okay, so in the current version, no, but you will see in the advanced session when we go through PlusSpec Elite that you will. Essentially, without going into too much detail, PlusSpec now has the capability to import and export CSV files, which gives you the ability to share them, do whatever you want to create different CSV, different cost setups, so that when you want to use a certain cost setup, you can simply load that CSV and use all of the costings in there. So it's going to be a really, really interesting tool. So yeah, come along to the next one. Okay. Okay, quite a few of you are actually asking when is the actual new version of PlusSpec Elite going to be released. We know that a while ago we started to say that it would be soon. We're actually we're doing a lot more development on it, and also we, as you know, have the 2017 version coming out, the update that everyone that subscribes gets automatically. That one should be due shortly. We're just doing our final stages of beta testing. We don't want to send you something that's got bugs in it. So we're just making sure that we've filled more features and that those ones work the way that we want them to work. With the Elite, we've got even more development that we're wanting to do. So it should be within a reasonable time span after the 2017 release. So, and that's obviously the full estimating capabilities. Now, it is likely that we're going to be sending out an alpha version or a pre-beta version to anyone that wants it. So for those of you who are in next session, we'll probably talk about that more. So just come along and we'll talk about how it may be possible for you to get an advanced screening of the PlusSpec Elite. Okay, a couple of questions regarding integration into various software. We don't have any plans to do so in the future at the moment. That being said, we believe that especially with the PlusSpec Elite, you'll find that that integration will be a lot more seamless. But hopefully, you'll be able to essentially use PlusSpec as the central location for everything that you need to do. So for all of your estimating, for all of your designing, for all of your on-site building. So it's the central location for everything that you need. But yeah, possibly in the future, we definitely don't rule anything out. Well, I'd like to say thank you for everyone who came along. It looks like I wasn't able, for some reason, to stop the recording. So for those of you who weren't able to attend the live version, it looks as though you're going to have access to all of the Q&A. So anyway, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you in our next session.